Yes, thank you very much and welcome to you all, and to those who will be listening to this presentation in the future. I guess it's spring in your neck of the woods. Well, right here, of course, in Somerset West, and I am right down at the tip of South Africa. It's winter coming on, hence my dress against the cold. But it's really a great pleasure to have this opportunity to spend some healing time with you. And what I want to do on this first occasion is to just introduce the basic principles of homeopathy and how it will apply to child care. So vitally important to get our children off to a wonderful, healthy start in life. So firstly, to briefly explain why gaining homeopathic knowledge and prescribing skills can be of such value to parents, especially in these difficult times that we have. And secondly, to answer any questions you may have about homeopathy and its role in domestic health. A little bit about myself. I was fortunate to be brought up in a homeopathic family. My father was a homeopath, practicing first in Leeds, where I was born, and later in London, until we emigrated to South Africa in 1949. I was born in 1940, quite some time ago, a year after the outbreak of World War II. During the London Blitz, I was evacuated out of London back to my family in Yorkshire, but not before being exposed to air raid sirens, blackouts, the drone of enemy bombers, the sound and impact of bombs falling nearby, the dreaded whistle of the V-2 rockets, the doodlebugs, and next day, the sight of familiar buildings around us reduced to rubble. It was a time of great stress for my family, for the country, for the family, and of course for myself, consciously and more importantly, unconsciously. At 7, I was sent to boarding school, the custom at the time, a tender age when being sent away from home is often traumatic, and it was for myself, fraught with homesickness that could explain the life-threatening meningitis I fell prey to 6 months later, a bacterial meningitis, usually a fatal disorder. Now, I mention these events in my early life because so many children, in one way or another, are exposed to traumatic experiences. The loss of grandparents, parents, siblings, much-loved pets, bullying at school, harsh, insensitive schooling, and far too often parental dysfunction, domestic strife, and broken homes. Such happenings impinge on emotional and physical health and have lingering consequences persisting into adulthood, often detrimentally affecting personality, thus bringing about wrong choices and decisions in life and encouraging behavior hurtful to oneself and others. I was blessed to have a homeopathic father to prescribe appropriate homeopathic remedies for all that befell me. Remedies that nullified the effects of emotional trauma, calmed my fears, healed my wounds, and protected me against infections, even that bacterial meningitis, in 1947, a time when antibiotics were in their infancy and infectious diseases, even when survived, often left permanent neurological damage. The wide ambit of conditions that homeopathic remedies can address and cure extends across the entire field of medicine, from simple wounds, injuries, infections, to the deepest emotional disturbances. My childhood was a time of war, and during the aftermath, a time of privation, rationing, and queuing for food, which I remember well. Circumstances were difficult and challenging, but the planet was in a far better state of health than it is today. Climate change was only just beginning. The ozone layer was still intact. The air we breathed was cleaner. Rivers were less polluted. Equatorial forests were extensive. Animal life more abundant. Chemical toxicity less. Chernobyl and microplastic pollution was yet to come. Today, the negative influences impinging emotionally and physically on ourselves and our children are more alarming than ever before and are steadily increasing. Yet again, the world is at war, and the shock waves of human conflict and suffering impact upon us all, consciously or unconsciously. Added to these dangers are the subtle effects of high-frequency energy waves generated by ever-advancing technology, the insidious effects of addiction to a virtual rather than a real world, and widespread substance abuse amongst the young. These dangers are reason enough for concern, but there is another danger, just as grave, if not graver. A threat that goes unheeded or remains largely unmentioned, even by those who are deeply concerned about climate change, about looming ecological disaster, and about the ongoing extinction of species. And this is the mounting state of human pollution resulting from the consumption of billions upon billions of dollars of pharmaceutical products every year, in the vain hope of mitigating and eradicating human disease by chemical means. Across the wide spectrum of emotional and physical illnesses that afflict mankind, infections, allergies, digestive disorders, more and more autoimmune conditions, hormonal imbalances, musculoskeletal defects, then insomnia, anxiety, depression, learning and behavioral difficulties in children. Conventional medicine has arrayed an impressive battery of chemicals, all of which act mechanistically, not curatively, testified by the vast number of people who are on permanent chronic medication. Now, I sit here before you. I've never had an antibiotic in my life. I'm 82 years of age. I am on no chronic medication whatsoever. In the old age homes, when they're taking in new people, the first question you ask is, what chronic medication are you on? And you're given a list of these. Life being sustained by artificial synthetic chemical means. And this story begins in childhood with the first suppression of a fever by means of an anti-inflammatory drug. So the process begins to evolve and expand. As valuable and even life-saving as chemical medicine may be, especially in emergency situations and overwhelming infections, it does not resolve disease processes at a causative level, nor does it stimulate and encourage the inherent capacity of the body to heal itself and bring about a permanent curative change. Conventional drugs act by overcoming opportunistic organisms, by suppression, control, replacement, supplementation, and palliation, all invaluable when called for and when no alternative exists. But in terms of healing, these mechanical approaches are simplistic, very much like applying a Band-Aid strip. The underlying cause responsible for the lack of resistance to infection, responsible for the metabolic imbalance or the disease process, persists. Not only does it persist, it is ever increasing. When symptoms of imbalance and malfunction are continually suppressed, the energy of the condition is driven inwards. That energy implodes, and a deeper level of dysfunction results. Now, a simple instance of this is the suppression of skin diseases, which is rife. For example, eczema by the application of coal tar or cortisone creams. The disappearance of the skin eruption is often followed by the development of allergies, typically hay fever or allergic rhinitis, which in turn, when suppressed by antihistaminics, drives the underlying condition to an even deeper level of expression, often leading to asthma, which requires even more stringent measures of control. So we have eczema, hay fever, asthma, clearly a path towards disease and not towards healing. Like all life forms, the human body evolved through natural selection, a screening process by which genetic changes beneficial to survival are passed on to succeeding generations. Summed up, this means survival of the fittest, the survival of organisms, species, and individuals blessed with a competitive advantage. A natural law that extends not only to human life, but to human society. Those best able to defend themselves, those best able to accommodate and adapt, succeed and prosper. For thousands and thousands of years, the human constitution has survived and flourished due to its innate capacity to defend itself appropriately when challenged and to restore itself when injured. It therefore possesses all the necessary defense and repair systems and the knowledge of how to deploy them. The body knows best how to survive and how to heal itself. And this is borne out in the instance of a simple open wound. We can ensure that that wound is clean. We can stitch it when necessary, but only the body knows how to heal that wound. Our ancestors perceived this and honored this innate wisdom. Still in touch with the great mother goddess and her all-loving, all-powerful omnipresence, they knew that she had created the cosmos for the benefit of humanity, and that she would have blessed her earth children not only with already at hand natural remedies for their ailments, she would have designated each a therapeutic signature, whereby its healing virtue might be recognized, an encoded token accessible to human insight and intuition, comprehensible to us all. Over generations, the shamans, the medicine men and women of old, assembled an enduring legacy of medicinal knowledge derived from minerals, plants, and animals, which they bequeathed to posterity, which they bequeathed to homeopathy. To be easily recognized, the therapeutic code revealing a substance's healing power had to be based on similarity. For instance, a root that oozes red sap when damaged indicated its ability to staunch hemorrhage. Plants bearing yellow flowers declare their affinity for the liver. Plants that have red berries, like the hawthorn, are demonstrating their ability to benefit the heart and the arterial circulation. Blue flowers, more the venous circulation. These therapeutic similarities and connections extend to all that we can observe and all that we can know about the properties of minerals, the botany of plants, and the life history, the natural history of animals. Arnica, a plant famous for the treatment of bruises and injuries, emotionally and physically, grows best on mountain slopes, where it will be of the greatest value. A bee sting causes great swelling or edema, and even death from anaphylactic shock, an excessive hyperallergic reaction. By association through similarity, bee venom prepared homeopathically is a wonderful remedy for kidney disease and severe allergic conditions, even those that are life-threatening. Scorpion stings, which we get a lot in this part of the world, are extremely painful and can prove fatal. In such an event, African tribes traditionally use the scorpion itself as a remedy, either crushed and applied locally to the area of the sting, or roasted and taken by mouth, eaten. From these observations and experiences, the ancients found a fundamental law of nature, the law of similars, the truth that what a substance can cause, it can cure, or stated the other way around, a substance can cure what it can cause. This postulate is captured in the old adage, he needs a little of the hair of the dog that bit him. This saying presents for us another truth. It is by using very, very little of the causative hair or substance that the cure is achieved. And this is the law of the infinitesimal dose. The law of similars, a similar medicine can cure, and the law of the infinitesimal dose, that it must be in an imponderable energetic form, are the fundamental laws on which homeopathy is based. Unlike conventional medicine, homeopathy is a healing paradigm or system of therapeutics. It is not suppressive, it is not palliative, nor is it replacement therapy. It does not mask, it heals. Healing does not mean the mere disappearance of symptoms, since this can be achieved by chemical suppression. It means restoration of the entire economy to a state of ongoing vigor, health, and balance, which must be experienced both mentally and physically, and achieved by utilizing, stimulating, and above all, enhancing the body's own curative, defensive, and restorative powers, working with the body, in unison with the body, bringing into play those innate powers that the body has to defend itself, powers which have developed over hundreds of thousands of years. Newtonian science has estranged the scientific mind from the maternal healing power of nature. It has swept all before it and presents for our belief a mindless clockwork universe which came into being by chance without higher purpose, direction, or intent. That is the position of science. This science believes in an inverted hierarchy in which matter is the foundation of all life. Mind, consciousness, even genius, all being the result of complex neuronal activity. To such a science, the human being is a soulless combination of cells, organs, and systems, without higher destiny or any continuity of existence. A transient manifestation without a past or a future other than this lifespan. These cold, pragmatic assumptions underpin the science of modern medicine and explain its mechanistic approach to human disease. With this estrangement from Mother Nature comes the presumptuous conclusion that science is wiser than nature, that it knows better than the body how to manage and combat disease. This misconception swings into action in the conventional medical response to a simple fever. One of the first challenges a mother faces in looking after and protecting her baby. Fever is the body's strategic response to a viral or bacterial infection or challenge. The raised body temperature slows viral and bacterial replication, blunts the invading organism's aggression, its ability to spread, attack tissues, and harm the body. At the same time, the raised temperature evidences and speeds up the body's vigorous, healthy reaction to invasion, the mobilization of its forces, the priming of its defense systems. The fever is crucial to the body's ability to overcome the infection. It signals that the lights are on. The factory, the wheels are turning over. The body's killer cells are acting. Now, all this is well known to conventional medicine. Yet, the modern knee-jerk response to infective fever, in fact, I was taught exactly the same at medical school, is to prescribe an antipyrexial or anti-inflammatory drug, aspirin, paracetamol, ibuprofen, drugs to be found in most homes and certainly on all pharmacy self-medication shelves. Imagine the insult these chemical substances offer the body's finely balanced, highly sophisticated defense systems. They disempower the body, dampen its ability to defend itself, and disrupt the natural course of illness towards a rapid resolution that will strengthen the body against future infection. Because during the fever, the body is manufacturing specific antibodies perfectly matched to the genetic configuration of the invading organism. When the battle is won without chemical interference, the memory of how victory was achieved is stored in the body's archives. In the event of future infection, antibodies can be mobilized rapidly and efficiently. At first, the robust, healthy child will manage to overcome infection even though hampered by these anti-inflammatories, by doses of aspirin and Panado, etc. But each time fever is suppressed in this way, the body's defense systems are progressively weakened, and eventually antipyrexials will not suffice. The fever persists, or it starts to undulate. We have undulating fevers, up in the morning, down in the evening, or the reverse. And more serious signs of infection start to develop, possibly pus, follicles on the tonsils, enlarged glands, catarrh, the signs of pus developing, and other complications. Eventually, the serious signs of infection develop, and the next resort, of course, is to turn to antibiotics. So from our antipyrexials, anti-inflammatories, we now go to antibiotics. And what are we doing then? We set a thief to catch a thief, and only mischief can result. Now the drugs do the work. Antibody manufacture is impaired or fails. The body has no memory of success to fall back on when next challenged. The scene is set for recurrent infections and a general decline of the child's health, which will be experienced emotionally, intellectually, and physically. All three levels are impaired. Consequences that will be carried forward into adult life. The antibiotic thief we have employed disturbs the normal balance of the bowel flora, the commensal friendly organisms that live within us and support our metabolism, especially our assimilation, nutrition, and development. The sequence, antibiotic, disturbed bowel flora, maldevelopment, malassimilation, the problems that arise, the lactose intolerance, the gluten intolerance, which so many families have fought, to be expected. Even judiciously administered probiotics cannot compensate for the toxic effects of recurrent antibiotic therapy. The child's ability to flourish emotionally and physically is impaired. When the body produces a fever, it is always working at its optimal best. Come what may, the body always functions at its optimal best. It's doing the best it can under the circumstances. But when chemical suppression is repeatedly applied, that optimal best is continuously dropping. This is where homeopathy steps in to enhance that optimal best. Unfortunately, through inheritance, the body's defenses can be impaired from birth. Conception is not a fresh, pristine start to life. It is not a cleansing or an erasure of family history. A continuum of disease exists that extends through the generations. The diseases of our ancestors are most surely visited upon us. All our family trees are fraught with the legacy of the past, a legacy that impinges on us emotionally, intellectually, and physically. All families bear the consequences of inherited disease. All are tainted with the residual effects of those ancient skin diseases that we read of, including leprosy, which is more than just a skin disease, of gonorrhea, the ubiquitous STD, pervasive in all societies to this day, and now getting renewed energy, of syphilis that spread through Europe in the 1500s like a wildfire, and then tuberculosis, which also spread through Europe during the Romantic period. These diseases, which were so pervasive that the entire human race in one way or another has been influenced by these, and we carry this with us. These account for the many and varied diseases that afflict mankind today. The family tree of disease is not random or by chance. It is structured. It has a framework, a ramification that stems from these basic causes and then creates the spectrum of diseases that we see today. So no newborn cherub, no matter how perfectly formed, no matter how pink and glowing, no matter how robust or vigorous, is free of what homeopathic science terms chronic miasmatic disease. A miasm being an inherited blight, a stigma, or a contamination. What is our first warning of this? So often, a cradle cap. Cradle cap may be the first intimation of such a blemish. The tendency to nappy rashes. Not every baby gets a nappy rash. And those that do get nappy rashes, it can vary from just a few little blisters to an aggressive, acrid, corrosive type of eruption, which is capable of secondary infection. Colic, very common. Intolerance to mother's milk, another. Teething problems, the typical children's illnesses, particularly when they're experienced in a very severe degree. But so also temper tantrums, incessant screaming, insomnia, the night terrors of childhood, nail biting, thumb sucking, childhood fears and phobias, and later on the learning difficulties and behavioral problems that so many children are troubled by. Problems that beset so many and can determine the course life will follow, and even the way destiny will unfold. Striving always to mitigate the effects of inherited disease, the body's defense systems will always externalize the problem, throwing it outwards to the least harmful place. For example, the skin or the mucous membranes. Hence the prevalence of eczema in children. The body has that vigor and vitality to be able to externalize what has been inherited in the form of a miasm in a simple, non-aggressive safety valve, which is the eczema, which is thrown out onto the surface. It's thrown out to the least harmful place, the skin, the external layers, or the mucous membrane, as I said. When drug therapy thwarts this, again, the condition, as with the fever, is thrust inwards, and a more serious level of disease must result, which, though hidden, sometimes for years, will eventually result in emotional and physical consequences. The disease energy has been imploded and hence further corrupted, and emotional breakdown or even cancer may be the final outcome, many years in the future. By responding early to the promptings of nature, treating the early warning signs of inherited disease appropriately with homeopathic remedies carefully matched to the presenting picture, the body's own healing power can be harnessed and brought to the very optimum required to bring about healing at the deepest level possible. The stage upon which conventional drugs act is the objective plane of existence, the stage upon which we enact our lives, where we experience our joys, our griefs, and fulfill our destiny, is not on the objective plane at all. It is upon a subjective plane, far beyond the reach of chemical medicine. It is upon this subjective stage that the causes of disease can be found. It is here where we suffer, where we struggle, where we survive, that changes detrimental to health originate, and from there cascade down into the mental and physical spheres. Any curative system of medicine must be able to act at this subtle level to bring about permanent healing. The infinitesimal, imponderable, hence almost spirit-like, homeopathic potency can reach beyond the subjective plane, into the subjective plane, beyond the objective, into the subjective, and address the essence of disease at its point of origin, which is the interface between the soul and the ego self, the two combatants that face one another in every life, yours and mine. Right, well, that's just to give a background and a feeling and to distinguish actually between the role of allopathic medicine or conventional medicine, the modern paradigm of medicine, and homeopathic natural therapy. Each has its place. Each has its place. There are conditions where the allopathic approach saves lives, obviously. and where we cannot do otherwise than prescribe what is necessary for the circumstances presenting, the challenge that we have. But how much of our lives are spent in the ER room? So little. What we learned in hospital and medical clinics was for that kind of medicine, and we become very proficient in it. And unfortunately, across the field of medical play, it develops a sense of complacency that we are doing work and it's well done. And it is true, it is well done and done with the right intent. But the vast majority of emotional troubles and physical ailments lie outside that particular sphere of action. And it is there that homeopathy has its greatest effect. Now, are there any questions that you would like to pose that I can possibly answer?
We really don't know where to start.
I am sure.
Oh, my God.
Yes, true. You know, that's quite a mouthful, isn't it, that I've just given. It's a heavy and it's dense. I needed to get that across so that we have actually a position, a stance, a perspective. That is what I wanted to achieve, that we've got a common position, shall we say, that we can understand exactly where we are and where the world stands at this time and what we are facing, what we really are facing and what our children are facing, and how can we give our children that advantage they require in having a strong constitution unblighted by suppression. And, you know, a question you might ask me, of course, is, well, what is the role of vaccination? What would your approach be, David, to the COVID situation that we had a few years ago? How would you have stood? I think the stance actually explains exactly what one's attitude is to chemical interference with natural processes and interfering with survival of the fittest, which is a natural law of very profound significance. Survival of the fittest.
So yes,
this is possibly not the forum for us to say, well, I've got a child who's suffering from this, what would you advise? Because that would be inappropriate in a sense, because I haven't got the child before me and I cannot give you the differences that would lead to my decision as to prescribing. But homeopathy itself, how it works, anything I can explain in that regard?
Jade, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfectly.
Thank you so much, David.
Pleasure.
Incredible to hear you, actually. I do have, it's not specific, but I am currently undergoing combating Lyme's, so 3 co-infections, Borrelia, Bartonella, and Mycoplasma. And I actually am blessed to be with child at the moment, and I will be giving birth in November. I have never taken antibiotics, and I don't wish to give my child antibiotics, but I would like your wisdom on, I hear a lot about me passing on my disease to my child, and I understand that there will be a cross-contamination, but I also understand it is not just as black and white as that, and the child will be on its own path, fighting what it needs to, and absolutely inheriting my my wrongdoings and
no reason for any sense of guilt.
Yeah.
Or responsibility in that matter regarding the actual disease itself, or the legacy. We all have that legacy within us. And it is all finely tuned to the destiny of the child. Nothing is ever out of place. Everything is perfect and very wisely ordained, because that moment of birth is a moment of sacred truth, isn't it? It is an exquisite moment of perfection. And in fact, we move from one moment of sacred perfection into another. every moment. My entire life, in fact, has guided me to this point where I can see this image of you before me. Everything that I've done has brought me to this point. There is no other point that exists for me. Just you, me, those who are attending, the two of us. The same with the baby. The baby is born into a perfect state. And part of that perfect state is the disease. We call it disease. Let's call it imbalance, illness.
Yeah.
It's a physical state. It originated, the endowed part is karmic. The endowed part is karmic. If we accept the fact that we existed before birth, and that we will continue to exist after death, then we are eternal, we are immortal. And I think that is possibly a common ground for all five of us, isn't it? I should hope so. When we are interested in homeopathy, we're interested in the esoteric magic and mystery of life, that which lies beyond the obvious. And this matter of disease is part of that. Disease, we speak of disease and we think of it as an enemy. Modern science even sees nature as an enemy, wouldn't you think? Something to be controlled, something to be exploited, something to be literally abused. And nature, of course, is the feminine aspect of the creation. It's feminine. The soul is feminine. The ego is arrogant and masculine. So these things that come down through you to your child are ordained and correct. There is an endowed element which is karmic and linked to the child's previous existence. Unresolved matters which are carried into life from previous lives, which have not been resolved, and which still must crop up until they are overcome, transcended. In other words, we sublimate our suffering, we sublimate our difficulties and our problems. We profit from them, we grow from them. And this is the inheritance legacy that you're giving to the child. Now, during the later, whenever you go for a scan, if you go for scan after scan after scan, we're then impinging upon the child frequencies, high frequencies, which of course interfere with the child's tranquility. There have to be consequences. Does that mean no scans must ever be done? If it wasn't for scans, we wouldn't know about certain abnormalities, bad positions, and so forth and so on. Yes, it has a role. But when we're doing it repetitively and recurrently and just habitually, as it were, multiple scans detrimental to baby. Right, is there anything, and I mentioned the role of frequencies in our lives, the G5, the effects of Chernobyl, which are still extending outwards from Chernobyl to affect this entire planet. All of us are exposed to those ions. These play a big role. Is there something I could do for my child? Take, in my pregnant state, when I'm going for a scan? Absolutely. Zinc met is a wonderful, made from zinc, wonderful remedy to prevent what is so often the result of excess scan, hyperactivity, ADD, ADHD. You're impinging, here we're using four energies and impinging the little child at a time when it's still being formed, when the nervous system is exquisitely sensitive to vibrations. The next one is the vibrations coming from your own emotional life. That is why Baroque music, listening to Baroque music, is so often advised. It has such a soothing, Bach, Handel, Vivaldi, the soothing effect that it has upon the entire organism is beautiful. That is why I mention also the impact of Ukraine upon us, believe it or not, whether you are conscious about it, whether you're reading about it, whether you're tuning into what is going on there. We are sensitive beings. We are constantly transmitting. Our aura extends way beyond ourselves, doesn't it? Embraces the entire planet. And likewise, we are sensitive to everything that is occurring. So in attuning yourself to the perfect now, the fact that no matter what is transpiring in any moment, it comes with wisdom, it comes with love, and it is perfect. Everything is as it has to be. It could not be better. It is actually tailor-made, orchestrated for you. And the paradox of it all is that I can say exactly the same for me. The entire universe, I am the center of that. But you can say, I am the center of that, and I would concur. It is utterly true. When I say that I am sitting here in an ocean of love, that there is nothing that I can touch, see, or sense that is not the supreme consciousness, the beloved of beloveds. That is huge. It is huge. Now, if you can conceive of that and carry it from moment to moment throughout your pregnancy, what a healing effect must that have? And then to put into place the remedies that are called for when the time comes. You get contractions taking place, the Braxton-Hicks contractions you may know of, that simulate the birth process. What can I take for that? Oh, semicifugia, a beautiful remedy to help. And then you go into labor, and the labor is pathetic. The contractions are not coming as they ought. And you put in calophyllum in a low potency between contractions, and the whole birth process speeds up. The contractions are effective. The cervix dilates beautifully. Uterine contractions are optimal, without being too painful, not being too severe. And during that pregnancy, you become weepy and whiny, and you're complaining to your partner who's there, trying to do the breathing with you. And you start weeping, a dose of pulsatilla, and you pull yourself together and you get on with pushing. Or the girl who becomes so irritable and aggressive during the labor process. Doesn't that often happen? When you're telling the nurses off and the doula can do nothing right and husband had better go next door, he's just a bother and a hindrance. Chamomilla soothes the nerves, enhances the contraction. And if contractions are weak and not coming nicely, Sikali, which is produced from ergot, which is also used in orthodox medicine, but homeopathically does so in a non-toxic manner, can increase the contractions. And then if we hemorrhage too much afterwards, Sabina for postpartum hemorrhage. And if the lochia continues for too long, we're into 5, 6, 7 weeks, and we've still got this blood-stained lochia flowing, sulfur can bring that to an end, or some other remedy. I'm just giving you the ones that are immediately on call for conditions of this sort. And this is territory for domestic medicine, isn't it? These are conditions, and that is what we want to bring to mind in this course. The remedies that should be on your shelf, remedies that you can utilize if there is a challenge domestically. Medicine will only give you hardcore remedies for whatever complaint you ask for. If you're asking, you will certainly receive. And having been through medical school myself, that is all we are taught. And if we are then so totally satisfied with the scientific paradigm, we don't think further than that. And it's only those, like yourselves in fact, how many people out there really put their minds to understanding what life is all about, why we are here, what we're here for, what does this life mean, what is its significance? And then what role can natural medicine play in making this path that I'm following smoother, more comfortable, more easy? How can I bring out my soul qualities and push aside the promptings of the ego self, which is constantly, as in Adam and Eve in the garden of, not Bethlehem, no, but in Genesis, in the Garden of Eden. Yes, that snake in the tree, the ego self whispering in your ear, all the things it does. David said, I'm the center of the universe. Don't believe him. Oh, that's a long answer to a question.
Thank you so much, David.
It's by those means that you can allay what is naturally passing through you. You don't think that you're responsible for it, or even your ancestors are responsible for it. It's a natural process of evolution. This planet has to produce and present the dark and the light for us to be able to choose between the two. It has to be a dimension of opposites. And so often it is through our illness that we sublimate ourselves and transcend through the experience of illness itself. It's illness that draws the interested person towards the very remedies, the homeopathic remedies, that can assist the spiritual path. Otherwise, one would think that one's unassisted. What can we do? Is there any means for helping me bring out that which is good in me and bringing under control that which is dark? A lot of it being inherited nonsense, imprinting, conditioning from family, persuasions from tradition, from religion, from race, things which are built into the flesh and blood, the fabric of your being, and which are speaking for you. And which should be, of course, surmounted, silenced. So you move forward with clarity in your life and with a soul perspective. You look through the eyes of your soul, not through the eyes of your ego. Addressing these matters, I've discussed this often with Marek, is called depth homeopathy. When we go beyond just the little things of fever and tonsillitis, these are important, otitis, all the problems that children have, to the next level of treatment. And that is to deal with soul matters. The war, the conflict between the soul and the ego self. That interface is where we need to be particularly active. When you get a response at that level, the curative effect cascades down. I've used that word again. It cascades down from above downwards, from within outwards. That's what the body is trying to do. When the body creates a fever, it's throw energy, negative energy, outwards, outwards. I want fever. I want that rash. I want that eczema. I want that psoriasis. I'd rather have a psoriasis than a cancer. I'd rather have a cancer than I would madness or insanity or paranoia. You see, the body is always attempting its ultimate best, wants to chuck outwards. Orthodox medicine is all about concealment, masking, hiding, palliating, suppressing, controlling. When you go to the doctor, it's almost like taking your car to the garage. We have a dipstick. We measure the brake fluid. We measure the water. We measure the petrol. We measure everything. And if we see that there is something missing, we add it. Very often they don't check underneath to see if the oil is dripping out at the bottom. We just pour it in at the top. And so it is, even with natural medicine, you often come away from your natural healer with bags and bags of supplements and vitamins and so forth. And all of this really is, again, whitewashing on the outside, because the problem stems from who we are. And it's that who we are that needs to change to bring about a permanent healing process.
Thank you, David. Amazing.
Pleasure. In fact, it is such an honor to share this time with you. It really is. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. It's really a two-way flow. Because without you, I couldn't sit down here and reaffirm for my own sake the truth that I know. I need that too. If I'm a voice, I'm also an ear. Aha.
So, David, you've
Yes.
got a little boy in front of you. Really bad ear discharge. It's mercury. It's clear mercurial. You've got a little Loki in front of you. Is that ear infection already showing that maybe, you know, if he's not treated, that ego, the mercurial ego, the Loki, the kind of the manipulative, womanizing, you know, is going to be later down the line?
The wolf.
The wolf.
The wolf. Yes, here we're coming to archetypal homeopathy. In other words, we speak of the Wolf of Wall Street, don't we? That film, quite recent, I think you may know it. Leonardo DiCaprio, is it his name?
Yeah.
Anyway, the Wolf of Wall Street. We refer to people as a wolf. We know the wolf whistle. It's pejorative, it's derogatory, it is unpleasant. In the old days, when I was a young youth, it was something that was laughed at, it was flippant. But nowadays, of course, one's more sensitive to these niceties and PC, etc. So we can say it is a wolf-like response. Reading people's behaviour is part of homeopathic science. It is part of the art of homeopathy. We're looking at people and relating them to a plant, or to a mineral, or to an animal. And this is not to put them into a tight frame, because there's much more to it than that, but I need the central archetypal presentation. Now, Marek has spoken of a particular type who is known as the trickster. You will know them in your life, you'll have met such people. And there are certain homeopathic remedies which simulate the behavior of the trickster, and one such is mercury. Certain children have mercurial illnesses, indicating to us that a particular psychological state exists behind the illness that we're looking at. Constantly, the child is getting a repeat and a recurrence of the same sort of condition, particularly where fevers are suppressed artificially and where antibiotics are used rather than curative remedies. We know the recurrent nature of the illness is apparent. The child is always going through the same ailments. That ailment, we treat it on its own strengths or weaknesses according to the symptoms that are being presented at the time. But we're made aware at the same time of the ego-self-soul conflict that lies behind the physical presentation. And that is where, again, illness is of such value to us. It is like a portal or a window that you're looking through and seeing the deeper aspects of the conflict existing within the person. So here we have an ear discharge which comes along with certain behavioral traits, and mercury may be the remedy indicated. And what we are doing in prescribing mercury is to bring the person out of the trickster role that he would play in life into a more authentic life, a life more soul-based than ego-self-based. And that is what healing is all about at all levels, in all of us. The movement away from ego-self towards expressing ourselves through the majesty, the beauty, the radiance of our soul, who we really are, the true self. So in children, this is such a valuable process. The very illnesses that they suffer from, the asthma, a person who is bounded, a person who is closed off, who cannot fully express themselves, who cannot breathe in oxygen, cannot breathe in life and process it and absorb the virtue that life can give to them because of being a closed off being. How many people are brought up in families where we don't speak about those things? There's so much hushed. There's so much under the carpet. So many things that are not discussed, that are not open. And this is carried forward into life, and our emotions influence our physical being. This is a piano upon which I am playing. First of all, the piano was inherited from my mum and dad. They went through the First World War, never mind the Second World War. They went through the Depression, never mind the Second World War. My father, a homeopath, was under siege from the medical profession. He was in court 3 times for practicing homeopathy. Similarly to gay people who've been thrown into prison because of their gay inclinations. Homeopathy in some countries is against the law. He went through that, and through his championing of homeopathy, established the statutory body that we have in South Africa that protects the rights of the homeopath to practice homeopathy. But all of that, of course, acts upon the physical body in an erosive way. Unfortunately, homeopathy can assist one to get through those difficulties and to heal and to go forward with strength. So that is the answer to that question. Yes, Mercury, the trickster, and that trickster can be exorcised, if I could use the word, through homeopathy. The depth of action that homeopathy has is awe-inspiring. Similarity is absolutely critical. Knowledge of your remedies, the reading of human behavior, and this is something that women particularly excel at, far more than men in general. Paddy, my wife, we've had 4 children. I was previously married for 8 years to my first wife, and then I met Paddy, and we have been married for the last 47 years. In fact, 10th of April was our marriage day. And she brought up my 2 children from my first marriage, as well as our 2 children. So 4 children. Believe me, she's no medical training, no homeopathic training. But when I came home from work, when I saw even up to 25, 30 patients a day, and that on a homeopathic level is immensely intense. You know, they say the cobbler's son has no shoes. The homeopath's child very frequently is neglected homeopathically. But if you have a wife like Paddy who picks up on the clues that I give to her, by the time I came home and the child had tonsillitis or had a gastroenteritis or something, who had prescribed for the child, and successfully? Mummy. Women learn, and that is actually what started me off with my mother's course some 25 years ago. I noticed we always gave an emergency medicine chest to all new patients, particularly to mothers. And in that medicine chest, there was short instruction on how remedies could be used and what they were used for. And these mothers picked up so quickly on how to prescribe homeopathic remedies because they're non-toxic, because they cannot do any harm. Even if you select the wrong remedy, it's not going to hurt the child. It's not going to hurt the child at all. It simply will not have the effect that you would wish. But how they learnt to interpret symptoms. A doctor looks at your tongue and it's coated white. Ah, you've got an infection. He looks at your tonsils and he sees yellow spots on the tonsils. Oh, you've got a follicular tonsillitis. And he feels under here and he sees glands enlarged. You've got cervical adenitis. And he gives you anti-fever remedy. No fever, no response, no reaction. You haven't got the means to defend yourself. Don't worry, antibiotic as well. My bowel flora, okay, probiotic too. Nice, but not so nice. When the homeopathic mother looks at the child, she sees that the tongue is coated yellow, but down the middle of the tongue, maybe there is a red area, or the tip of the tongue is red and the rest of the tongue is coated. She notices that the follicles, the pus spots on the tonsil, are much more abundant on the right tonsil than on the left tonsil. She notices that the child's throat is eased when it drinks warm water, but not cold water. Meanwhile, the child sick in the second room is better by drinking cold water and not hot water. And the symptoms are worse on the left side rather than the right side. And that child wants to be uncovered, whereas the child in the first room wants to be covered and is cold and thirsty, and the other child is not thirsty at all. Aha. These are what we call modalities. It's very much like bird watching. To somebody who sees a raptor in the sky, we say, oh, look, there's a hawk over there. Aha. Is it a hawk? Is it an eagle? Is it a kestrel? Is it a buzzard? So in homeopathy, we look at a throat and we want to know, Is it an eagle? Is it a vulture? You follow, and it's the symptoms that dictate. And then the medicine is selected, a substance which can produce that very species of throat infection that we are looking at. Bring the two together and you've got a healing event. It is similar. It is so similar, but in an energetic form, not in a material form. We're not giving more of the same thing to the child. We're giving it in its energy form. It's like giving soul to the ego self. The soul and the ego self are precisely opposed, aren't they? Can it be otherwise? Your weaknesses and strengths are like this together, a perfect match, and the one has to overcome the other. So it is that the energy of the similar remedy goes into the condition and brings out the power of the body to heal itself. So in the course, very important is to be able to teach mothers to distinguish between one set of symptoms from another. What does she look for? The child that wants the windows open, the child that wants the windows closed, the child that wants fresh air blowing on them, the child that cannot stand it and has to be wrapped up. Great differences. The child that has perspiration, the other that has no perspiration, the one with thirst, the one with no thirst, the symptoms worse right-sided, left-sided, or both sides, or moving from one side to another. The child's last tonsillitis, it was the left tonsil that was affected, but doctor, this time is the right tonsil. And I've noticed that this has happened a number of times. Doctor, when I have my periods, when I have my ovulation, I feel pain on my right ovary. But last month it was my left ovary. And I know next month it's going to be my right ovary again. That's a language that the homeopath understands. And there are remedies which match that perfectly, and we then employ them to bring about the healing process.
Beautiful. Are there any more quick questions or?
Giving you food for thought anyway.
Please, Marion, if you unmute yourself.
Just a quick question.
Pleasure.
I wonder if we go up to a high potent, like D200, I gave it to a young lady very shortly ago, Nux vomica, because she had fear of going out. She was running to the loo all the time, and it worked fantastic. And she was totally without fear for like 5 days, and then it stopped. So I repeated it, and this time I gave Nux vomica D200 4 days, and no action. How can it be that it's working 1 minute and not the next minute?
Because you need to possibly go deeper. The potency has to be changed. That would be an indication.
Yes.
Sometimes, of course, the remedy needs changing, but you wouldn't think immediately that. There was good response. Remedy is correct.
Yeah.
It has petered out. Therefore, we have one of two conclusions to make. Number
Yes.
one, that it was the incorrect, not the incorrect potency, but the incorrect potency to repeat.
Right.
And you were absolutely correct to repeat the potency. That'd been a good response, but this time it peters out or doesn't take place. Therefore, we need to go either up or we can go down.
Yeah.
If the
Okay.
person's vital force, what we term their general vigor and vitality, warrants it, rather go up. If you're dealing with a person who's weak due to the illness or due to their state of health or due to their age even, then come down. The potency was too high and the body could not produce the energy required to follow the route that the potency was pointing to. Bring down the level of potency and you find, the body can respond to a 30 CH better than
Yes.
a 200, or we go up to the M potency. If that fails, then very often we have to have a look at the miasmatic presentation. Now, if it is bladder problems and having to wee too frequently, that is the pelvic area.
Yes.
And the pelvic area particularly is affected by what we call psychosis. And psychosis is based upon the gonorrheal inheritance, where I mentioned briefly the skin inheritances, we call that sora, linked to excessive sensitivity of the skin to victimization or parasitization. And that is really exemplified perfectly by the scabies type of infection. That's one. Number two, that would be your cradle cap type of situation. Now we're getting trouble in the bladder area. That's the realm of gonorrhea. That child or that person, that man has inherited a gonorrheal strain. And so often we find that there is what we call a stop spot. You've chosen the right remedy, but bang, you've come up against an impenetrable level of inherited disease. You need to break through that. And the remedy to break through it is often the nosode, made from gonorrhea, which is medarhinum. And that I would use usually in a 30 or a 200th potency. Interpose a dose of that, and you find, wow, Nux vomica once again continues its good work.
Thank you very much.
There are other techniques that we can use, but that very briefly and very simply explains what we need to do. Disease, as you can imagine, coming down through generations and generations, must be like the Grand Canyon of Colorado, if you're looking at it. The layers, there's granddad, there's great-granddad, there's great-great-granddad, there's great-great-great-granddad. And we've got all these layers. Now when we're treating initially on the surface area. And so we have to penetrate deeper and deeper. And then whew, the whole thing starts to demolish, very much like the Twin Towers. Once you've got it started, it's got an impetus of its own. You don't have to painstakingly go through every layer to reach success. No, once you've got the structure going, it then implodes itself. Beautiful to see. Yes, it gains impetus. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Pleasure indeed.
Oh, thank you, David. Brilliant. Well, the course that David's mentioning is called The Principles of Homeopathy, which provides a fundamental understanding of homeopathy and how to use it for self-limiting conditions that we're exposed to in daily life. And there's 5 modules. So they cover the laws of homeopathy, first aid remedies, tissue salts, major remedies for fever, gastritis, eyes, colds and flu, behavioral problems, shock, trauma, depression, pregnancy, Jade, and childbirth. So that would be a good module for yourself. I mean, it's like a first-year course in homeopathy, and once you know this, wow, you are empowered, believe me, to be able to treat your children and your family and yourself. Well, maybe use somebody else to treat yourself, but so what it'll give you a major grounding and confidence to prescribe the right remedy, because as David has said in the past, we don't know what the medical care system is going to be like, in the future. And if we can build up the homeopathic way of approaching disease, we're going to find that preventative medicine is the answer, and homeopathy is very much preventative medicine, quote Dr. David Lilley. So, and as you can see, it's very
safe paradigm.
Yeah. And it's based on laws. It follows laws. And it's, that course is now available. And for anybody that's, I think Marianne, you're doing the course.
Yes, I am. I haven't started yet. I need to get a little bit more on top of things here.
Okay. Well, you can just play it in the background. It's amazing. We've played it in the background, and we've had plumbers and electricians in the house, and they all stop working, and they just start listening to David. And I think one of my lecturers said homeopathy once in a lecture. She said homeopathy is truth, and I think even the ego has to bow down to the truth. And I think that's the difference with David. Not from a egoic point of view, but David, I think, is the only homeopath, really, the only world-renowned homeopath that I've heard that really talks about the soul, and that life is a prescription, and that this is soul medicine. And takes us deeper, as he called it, depth homeopathy, takes us deeper into the archetypes. These remedies of archetypes, they are powerful force fields of energy. And I really recommend David's book, The Wolf, which will take you on that journey, and then, which will blow your mind, The Raven. Take me to the unconscious. Show me what it's all about.
It's an exciting world out there once you enter into it, I must say. 82 years on, I can only look back on a life blessed by homeopathy. And that blessing continues into my children and now my grandchildren. It's quite remarkable. We are all free of drug remedies, never had any, never use them, never find them necessary, because when you start early and you continue, you build up the constitution beyond the need for chemical intervention. And most important, of course, you keep the field of the mind free of suppression.
Mm.
It is so easy to start taking a sleeping pill because you cannot sleep. But once you've embarked upon that, you've crossed a Rubicon. And the way back is not as easy as you might think. It is so with anxiolytics and with antidepressives. And of course, that is what the billions and billions of dollars are being spent on. So few of our patients have not been interfered with in this way, or interfered with themselves literally in this way. And unfortunately, so many young people who come to me have been experimenting with recreational substances. Life is fraught with dangers. And it's the introduction of clean thinking right from the start that really protects one against this. Clean thinking.
Mm. Yes.
Life is arduous enough without adding problems to it. But even when I say that, and all the things I've discussed regarding the state of the planet at the moment, it's all perfect. It's all perfect. It's just as it needs to be. Every moment. Good.
And also, as my wife would say, trust the divine feminine.
Yes, yes, yes. Basic trust is what it's all about. It's not belief, it's not faith, and it's certainly not hope. You know, hope, always thinking of tomorrow. Hope that tomorrow will be better than today. And of course, tomorrow doesn't come. So hope is no good. It's trust. It's absolute trust that what is unfolding is perfect, is necessary, and is the best that can happen. That's taking it a bit further, because it doesn't matter what is happening. Not what is happening. Anything.
Oh, thank you, David.
Pleasure.
And
so, are we closing?
I think so, David. Yes, we've kind of gone over time, if that's okay with everybody. But please.
Thank you. That was
great pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monica. Nice to meet you, Monica.
Pleasure. It was really lovely. So then, would you send information about the course?
Yes, Monica. I'll email you, and I'll email a recording copy of this.
Okay, fantastic.
But it's been like homeopathy. It's not about quantity, it's about quality. So thank you, everyone.
And
thank you.
You've actually provided the platform for a very important day. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Because having an audience brings something extra out into the discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you.
God bless.
Can I just?
Good luck, Jade.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
You got this. You'll be fine.
Thank you.